This is an instinct. This is not an instinct. This is also an instinct. This is also not an instinct. The lion has a whole pride of lionesses working for him. Chief Mongo Fire of the Cameroon has 58 wives. The lion has 20 cubs. Chief Mongo has 60 children. He had to fight to get to where he is. And so did he. And so does everybody. The human instinct is one of the most debated topics in all of physiology. Do humans have instincts like a zebra or a leopard would? We've known about the motherly instinct to protect and nurture the newborn, or even the social instinct of grouping and belonging. But as far as scientific understanding goes, the word instinct is more so a mental construct than it is a real physiological part of being a human. But what even is an instinct, and how do we assess whether we have it or not? For something to be considered an instinct, it needs to have three things. It needs to be unlearned, to be within every single member of the species, and it also needs to be expressed the same way within each of those members. When birds migrate thousands of kilometers every year, they somehow know exactly where to go, even if they've never been there before. Every single bird from the species goes there, and they all go there at the same time and stay for roughly the same time as well. Migration is an instinct that birds have. So let's break down whether the concept of instinct as we know it is something that humans are born with, or is it something that we like to throw around when we can't explain a behavior that feels so innate. The earliest concept of instinct came from Aristotle's political work. He believed that man was instinctively drawn to living in social groups and big communities. He called it a universal social instinct. He also believed in instinctive qualities between men and women, and once famously wrote that a man would be thought coward if he had no more courage than a courageous woman, and a woman would be thought loquacious if she had no more restraint on her conversations than the good man. Basically saying that the male instinct is to be more courageous, and the female instinct to be more restrained. He wasn't exactly known for his progressive views. Aristotle compared human motivations to animal behaviors very closely and concluded that humans also have instincts just like animals do, like bees building their hives, spiders spinning their webs, but the thing that separates us from them is the ability to reason. The extrapolation of the instinct theory from simple creatures to explain the unlearned behaviors of man was a natural inclination, but not so straightforward. You can probably guess where that type of thinking took us next. Humans would go on to use instinct to claim superiority over the animal kingdom, of men over women, and pretty much every target group being worse or better than the other. The most widespread belief to have come from this time was believing that humans had a special status above other animals, because we can reason and rationally control our actions, whereas other animals were guided solely by their instincts. René Descartes called these lower animals as automatons, incapable of feeling actual pain and which could be dissected without anesthesia. This argument was used to believe that humans were loved most by their god. An even crazier concept to have come from this time was believing that some people were better than others if they had less base instinct or if they could rationally take over their instincts. This was essentially the basis for why they thought women were not capable of clear thinking and therefore did not need formal education, the right to own property, or the right to vote for that matter. Historically, the concept of instinct wasn't just full of muddled science, but of selective interpretation and fallacy. The next time we heard of instinct in the theoretical space was in 1913, when the fathers of the behaviorist theory tried to dismantle it. John B. Watson wrote Psychology, as the behaviorist views it, and it would go on to become the dominant model of thinking in psychology. It stated that behaviors are shaped almost entirely by the environment and by reinforcement, and not by internal mental programming like instincts. Honestly, the behaviorists might not have taken such a strong stance against instinct if it wasn't used to explain anything and everything under the sun all the time. During the gap between Aristotle and Watson, the word instinct was used more than 2,000 times in scientific literature. Researchers would pretty much invent a new instinct for every time they stumbled upon a behavior that they could not explain. If a term can be used to explain everything, then it explains nothing. So the behaviorist claim was a well-needed breath of fresh air at this point in time. Not only did it reject the staleness of the instinct theory, but also the circular reasoning of it. Previously, you would observe a behavior, label it an instinct, and then use that instinct to explain the behavior. Behaviorists saw this as pseudoscience and instead believed that the environment determined the behavior. They believed that virtually all complex human behaviors could be explained using conditioning and history. Watson famously once claimed that he could take a baby and through controlled conditioning could turn it into any sort of person regardless of background. This was also a more optimistic claim because it's better to believe that behaviors are learned and not inherent, meaning that society is not stuck in its ways and people can improve. By the mid-20th century, the word instinct was eliminated as a motivational concept. It almost came back when ethologists tried explaining the simplest definition of instinct, from a duckling following its mother. But even then, they resorted to feeling that more than an instinct, it was a need to be following around a moving and quacking object, necessary for the developmental period. But here's the thing, behaviorists might have succeeded in stopping the use of the word instinct in scientific literature. They failed to reject the essential claim of the instinct theory, which was that even though behaviors might be overturned by conditioning, but they're still very much innate to humans. Some of these behaviors include social grouping, distrusting the new and the unfamiliar, competition, loss aversion, and many more. In 1940s, when social psychologists tried to find an alternative view as to why aggression is so innate to humans, they said that frustration leads to aggression. But when pressed further, they could not find any other reason than it just being innate to human nature. Even the presence of a weapon during a frustrating experience enhanced the likelihood of aggression as a triggering effect. The word instinct wasn't mentioned, but it came very close, and honestly, I couldn't tell you the difference. Modern psychology may not like to use this word, but instincts are also grounded in physiology. Certain species have genetic circuits that express specific behavior which unfolds the same every time. These genetic circuits develop in every member of the species and are expressed in the same manner. I hope that reminded you of the criteria for what's considered an instinct, because that's exactly what this is. Think of mammal infants suckling on titty. This is an instinctual response that is unlearned and the same in every member of the species. Instincts like these are thought to be associated with the older and more primitive regions of the brain. Areas like the hypothalamus, the brainstem, and the amygdala that are collectively responsible for the basic reactions that include fight or flight response and hunger. In humans, basic drives have the strongest instinctual evidence. But things get muddled for complex social behaviors, things like aggression, maternal instinct, and language. Biology sets us up to predispositions and biases, but almost everything can and does get shaped by learning and culture. We start off as primitive beings that are controlled by the primitive regions of the brain. But as we grow, cortical reasoning develops and it overtakes the instinct, and our behaviors start to reason more deeply. Who knows whether if it's the instinctualists or the behaviorists that have it all figured out. But as long as we're not using these models of thinking as excuses for undesirable behaviors or claiming superiority over other animals, we should be okay.